Hello everybody. We are going to call this take two because I just did what was probably the best video that I've made so far, and if you have watched any of my other videos, you know that bar is pretty high. So in order to top some of my past videos, this one had to be in a class by itself, but dumbass here didn't hit start recording. I talked and talked and showed everything, and so we'll call it a practice run, and hopefully this one is equally as bad as the last one. So today we're going to talk more about data quality dimensions. We talked yesterday, or the last time we talked about timeliness. I showed you some SQL statements that you can leverage and some ideas to build on and understand if your data is current. You know, basically that where's my data topic. We talked about that. Today we're going to move over to data profiling, and you'll hear data profiling talked a lot in the data tech circles, and whether it's being done. That's always a lot of tech times like, well, have you profiled the data? Question. And so we're going to let you answer that question as yes, I've profiled the data. So what is data profiling? If you look at what Wikipedia says, you can read it here just as well as I can read it to you. I think the bottom line is, my own, this is data about your data. And you'll hear metadata talked about. Essentially, that is the data about your data. And it's important, especially in data quality fundamentals, or what I like to call data quality for the sake of data quality. This is all of these dimensions. Is my data current? Do I have duplicates? Are my foreign keys there? Do I have orphan children? All of those items that we're going through in this little series are all based on metadata, as opposed to contextual data quality that are based on real-world problems, and is the data up to the challenge to provide me answers to those real-world problems. Both are fundamental and both are very important. It's just right now we're really focusing on the fundamentals. I believe you need to get those right before you can effectively move on to the next step. So we're going to scroll through a few PowerPoint slides. It's kind of tricky to know how best to do this, whether you should do it on PowerPoint or live. And I think what I'll do is do the PowerPoint run through real quick, and then we'll jump over to BigQuery directly and show it in action. So this is the statement itself. It can look a little bit different depending on your system and what it supports or what it requires you to tweak to make it work. But in general, we've got a few components here. The first component we have is down at the bottom here, which is, well, if we look high level, we've basically got a statement that's executing immediately from the SQL engine. And it's basically saying select all of this gobbledygook here as, I called it internal query, but you could call it Bob, doesn't matter. And then it's saying from, and then from is basically saying do another concatenate. This is pretty simple. It's just showing you we need to be able to know what the table is, and that requires the project name, the table schema, and the table name in order to be able to do a from statement up here effectively in the SQL code. And then you're just getting the field path name, which is essentially the column, and the data type. And these are all coming from that informational schema column field paths that we talked about last time. And then the table we're actually going against is Hail reports, and you could increase this and do more tables in one, or you can do one at a time. There's all kinds of ways you can approach this. And then structs, and then geography, which honestly I didn't even know was a regular data type. That doesn't work so hot in this item up here, so I've excluded those for the moment. I think I could probably come up with a way to do that with some casts, but at any rate, it wasn't critical to this conversation. And then if we come up here, we see, execute immediate, we see string aggregates, we see concatenate, and we see a union all. All of this information, we'll walk through it, but essentially what's going to happen is it's going to read every record from this select, and it's going to, inject the column names and the table names for each one of the return rows here. And then in between each one, it's going to put a union all so that we can actually create this. So we'll drop down a page. Just a couple of things just for kind of a baseline. Execute immediate is a way to execute dynamic SQL, and basically SQL that writes more SQL. It's a sort of that buck up buttercup moment. If you're mainly a select star, or maybe inner joins, outer joins, maybe even a partition over, this is the next level up. They can be kind of finicky in the formatting. So, but don't let that scare you. You just keep busting away at it until you get it right. Uh, Difference between string, aggregate, and concatenate. The best way I've got it kind of rationalized in my mind is, concatenate joins columns together and it essentially forms a row. And string aggregate takes different rows of strings and puts them together. The one thing when we look at this, if you're looking in detail, you're going to see this very beginning statement up here. You've got select and everything. One of these things is not like the other, and you'll see these double quotes here. Don't let that get under your skin. All that's doing is basically allowing us to hard code the actual column name as one of the columns in our return set, and then you'll see, count timestamp. This is just as you would normally see. You actually saw that in my last video. I did the same thing to hard code basically the tables so that we could see them in a return value. So we talked about this already a little bit. This is that bottom part of the statement where we're actually going against the information schema and the column field paths. So basically what we get returned here is this becomes the path to allow us to get to the table in the upper part of the query. And then of course we have the column and the data type here that we bring back. I think I might have renamed that to underscore. No, I left it as the column here. Okay, good. I was fiddling around with it earlier. I don't know when I cut and pasted these return values. So if we think about that, and what's this next one, I believe, is the full deal. So I think what we'll do is go to BigQuery real quick. We see this same statement here that we were looking at. When we execute this, what happens is we basically get two returns. And you're used to seeing your results, straight away when you execute a statement in pretty much any environment. What you're getting here is you're basically getting the guts of the query that you wrote, and when you apply the execute immediate part of it, and the rest of it, what you're essentially getting is this is what gets generated by that query. So you could imagine if you've got 100 columns, this can get very long, and you don't want anything to do with having to type this out. Even with cut and paste, it's just a ugly little deal. If we view the results here on this end query, essentially what we have is that magical data profiling. So we have the columns in the table. We could add the table name here too if we wanted to, just like what we did with the column. How many records are out there? How many distinct values are out there? Do we have any null values? And what the min or max are. So this is data profiling. You could add averages. You could add midpoint. Depending on your database that you're using, midpoint can be kind of sketchy as to how well it's actually supported. But these are the ones that give me the most bang for my buck. I'm really always interested in null values and distinct values. If you think you've got a state field and you're supposed to be a nationwide company and you only have 12 states, well, you aren't too nationwide now, are you? So, I mean, there's just sort of that stuff that you can learn from seeing this metadata, this data about the data that you can leverage. Now, from a data quality, like alerting perspective, we can use this and we will use this, to create alerts when we have null values where we expect that there shouldn't be, whether it's by design or by inference. But for at the moment, we're just going to bask in our greatness that we were able to write this query. And let me swing back to the PowerPoint real quick. Go to this last page. So this is just another way of looking at it. I tried to break this out a little bit. We see, select timestamp, and then the count distinct, min and max, and then you can see where it injects the actual path where it's going to get to hail reports, and then it adds that union all, goes to the next field, so that's time. Union all goes to the next field, that's size, goes to the next field, somewhere down here, that's state, or maybe it could be up a little bit higher. Select location is up here. So this is all just one big giant SQL statement with minimal white space. And if we start to introduce more white space and line feeds, then we can sort of pick it apart. That's a lot of what I end up doing is pick it apart, working backwards. When you've got this query up here, first I knew I needed to have a list of values that we were going to select from, and that's where I got that from. And then you can start to build off of it up into here. And this was by no means something I threw together in 5 minutes. It took me some time, but I've been using this same basic logic for years in order to profile data, and I think hopefully it helps you. I mean, that's the whole goal of doing this and putting myself out there. As bad as these videos may or may not be, and maybe they'll get better. I kind of hope that I'll do a better job. I lifted my laptop up a little bit this time so you don't have to look up my nose, which was kind of embarrassing. But hopefully at some point, be able to look back at these and say, like, you remember when you were making videos that were these shabby? Now, I doubt they'll ever get to be super professional. I'm not actually a big fan of those that looked like they were made in some Hollywood theater. I tend to like the regular guy, regular lady, putting themselves out there, trying to offer up some information or some entertainment. And anyway, starting to ramble again, so we'll stop the video and hopefully I'll post this code up here. I'll add a little bit of code too as to how you can do just by specific columns, and then also where you would want to include a date limitation, because I just want to remind you again, if you take this and tweak this so that it runs on your system, regardless of what database it is, if you've got a table with 25 million rows and 1,000 columns, it's going to chug through that entire table. I would advise against that unless you've done it before and had no issues with it. But it's always better to limit yourself and do a little bit of trial and error before you let her rip. So that's it for tonight. Have a great day, and we'll talk again.